Hey everyone, today we have for a change Hamel Husain with us. And essentially, Hamel is one with MLOps. He was an employee at Data Robot. He was a staff engineer at GitHub. And, like regular people have blood flowing through their veins. Hamel has MLOps flowing through his veins. That's how integrated with the field he is. Would you say that this is a correct statement, Hamel?
That's kind of scary. It makes me want to stop doing ML ops. I want, makes me feel like I've gone too far, almost.
Okay, well, that's something to consider. But well, I really appreciate how deep into the field you are, and I love all the thoughts that you have on the field and what works and how things work there. So today we will be discussing GitHub Actions, right? GitHub
Yeah,
Actions. But
yeah,
before we do, Hamel, I have a confession to make. I'm a fairly happy machine learning engineer. I do quite well for myself, and I have never ever used GitHub Actions before. So, what is this GitHub Actions? Why would I even need this in the first place?
yeah. So so I've been on your show about I think this is the third time, maybe the third time. And I think the overarching theme is, what are things that are very good to learn, or high impact
Mhm.
things to learn that are adjacent to your workflow that you're likely to encounter, if you don't encounter, that maybe you should pay attention to, that can really help you. And I'm not talking about like things that are just completely random. I'm talking about things that I think are along the path of machine learning or software development, in the sense like you do a lot of software development, you do machine learning, and then you know and so so GitHub Actions. Okay. Like what, like, first of all, um, what is GitHub Actions? So take your favorite machine learning project. I don't care what it is. Um,
Mhm.
or maybe your top three, and go to GitHub and look at a pull request. Chances are, if you've ever opened a pull request on one of these tools, you will see that there's this very interesting thing happening. And maybe I should share a screen and we can like look at one
Sure,
together. So
absolutely.
let me just share a screen here. Hold on a second. Let me
There's
just.
this annoying bit that happens with my PRs. They go through a CI pipeline.
You have to enable sharing in
Oh, I
this.
have to enable sure.
Yeah.
One participant can share. Advanced sharing options. All participants, please.
There we go. Got
You
it.
now have you now have the sharing rights.
Okay, great. So I'm gonna go to GitHub. Tell me, okay,
Yeah,
give me an open source project.
an
Not
open
fast
source
AI.
project.
We always
Yeah,
do fast AI. Let's do something else.
no. Let's do Merlin NV tabular, or even better, Merlin data loader. It's a smaller project, but one that I honestly enjoy very much.
Okay, Merlin data loader. Let's
Yeah.
give it a shot. Are there any pull requests? Yeah, okay. So it looks like, there's a lot of draft ones. There's this one. And so if
Uh-huh.
you go to open a pull request, you will see this. And you might,
Yes.
so like, what is going on? What is this? You
Yeah,
have,
exactly.
and these are tests.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, that's cool. You might see the test and you might see, okay, there's this test that failed. Maybe, this test failed because there's not a label for this pull request. This needs a label. And there's all kinds of other tests like, okay, something here is going on. Looks like these are unit tests.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if I know that you have open pull requests on open source projects before.
Yes.
And
So
I have opened many pull requests on open source projects, and this has saved my ass so many times. Think about how embarrassing it would be to like open a pull request, and you're like, yeah, this is great, and it just like breaks everybody. It breaks everybody's workflow. It makes like a dumb mistake that you wish you caught. And I can't tell you how
Yes.
many times like these kind of things like help you to have higher quality code, and actually like makes your life easier, because like you end up like automatically testing stuff. It's not like a chore. You're like, oh, I forgot to do it or something. I would say this is very, in the software development world, this kind of thing called CI/CD is very much required, or is considered to be like a very core part, of the software development workflow.
So
And
I
yeah.
maybe lied a little bit in saying that I have never used GitHub Actions before, because
Hmm.
that's the part that I use daily or that I interact with
Hmm.
daily. But I don't necessarily associate with GitHub Actions, and my experience is that I can sort of find where it lives in the GitHub folder of your repository, and maybe I can disable it. That's as far as I go, because it's a scary YAML file that has
Yes. Look
like
at this. Look at this. Yeah, totally.
is this? I tried reading the
Yeah,
documentation on this once, and I fell asleep because that's how engaging it was. Like,
totally.
what does all of this mean?
Yeah. So, okay. So, like, let me just zoom out a bit. So, one, I think it's really interesting. Okay. So, it's not interesting. I think it's really useful to know because, if you ever want to create software one day, which you will, if you're a data scientist at some company, you probably want to at least make some utilities to
Hmm.
package up common things that you're doing. You want to have these tests. Just having these tests in your repository signals quality. It signals that this is something that's organized and something that um, you know, like it's polished and it looks. I mean, it makes your project look good to have CI/CD. And so it's okay. So how do you get started? So I will be doing a course on this soon. I don't have a link to it or anything that you can link to, unfortunately. So that, I mean, you
You,
can
you,
just follow
you,
me on
you,
Twitter or something. But um,
okay. You
it
you
is, yeah,
preemptively you preemptively you knew where I was getting. Yeah, we'll
yeah. I
link
know
to
where
this
you're
from the
going. Yeah,
description of the video.
yeah.
But
I
yeah,
do have. If you go to Google and you say
uh,
like GitHub Actions data science,
uh-huh.
I actually don't know what's gonna pop up. Let's see what pops up. So you'll see some things I have, this I have written some stuff, so it's all the way down here. You'll see other people have written about it.
Mhm.
It's not really necessarily about GitHub Actions, but there's stuff I've written about like how to get started. There's even like there's some examples of like motivating examples. There's this if you could do GitHub Actions fast pages. Um,
Mhm.
Actually, that's not a good one to Google. Okay, this one, GitHub Actions, the GitHub Actions providing data scientists with new superpowers. I kind of give you like some idea of what GitHub Actions is, and then some idea. I start to introduce some things about YAML here, like, okay, what does this mean? Like, what does this piece of YAML mean? What is that? Just like kind
Mhm.
of get you going, get you started.
But
Um, but
it's really
it's like
hard.
Kubernetes. It's
Huh?
like it's not meant to be written from scratch. You don't want to write this from scratch. And
Okay.
that's what I think a lot of these configuration, just like the Kubernetes, like I was describing before, this YAML file is definitely, whoever wrote this did not write it from scratch. Yeah, it's meant to be copied and pasted and edited. And like I even have in my, you know, um so let me see if I can open a window here. So yeah, if I have this shortcut. See? You see what I did?
Wow. Yeah.
That I have this shortcut to do triple dash actions. It just gives me this whole thing. And I copy and paste this and I just start editing. And I think this is like okay, I think it's really important that I tell you this because
Mhm.
it is somehow against your a lot of people's intuition that this is a okay way to write code or do something technical. You feel like you're doing something wrong. Like, what do you mean? I'm not going to write it line by line. Like, that means I don't understand it. And it's like, okay, it's good to understand what is there, but you end up deleting everything you don't need and kind of just editing what is there. And so if you understand like a little bit of the high level structure, you can start to get at it. And that's what's here. I mean, so there's a
So,
couple of, yeah.
Hamel, where does a regular human being, a mere mortal, get a template for that? Like, where do we go? Do we just go to our favorite repository? Like here, I would go to Merlin data loader and just snatch that file there.
Yeah, go to a repository that you understand more a little bit. It'll like help if you have some interest in it. Otherwise, it'd be too boring, you know? Because like if I walk through this, or you said you like this project a lot.
Yeah, I like this project. Yeah.
Yeah. So if I explain to you what this YAML is, you're likely to understand. You're likely to like remember more because it'll be more interesting to you. And so I would say just copy and paste that and make it in your template. Start there.
So it's a good starting point. Like we start with somebody else's workflow. Cool. So that we have covered. So what are the high level ideas here? I see there's a name.
Yeah. Okay. So let's do a lightning round of explaining this. So you have a name. That's going to show up in like some dashboards of like, this when it runs. So that's fine. And then you have this on section is called triggers. Okay. So GitHub Actions allows you to run code in response to anything that happens on GitHub. So that can be an issue comment, that can be a PR being open, closed, that can be something being labeled. And you could basically do anything. So it's if I Google GitHub Actions event triggers, okay, go there, you'll see a long list of different events that can trigger a GitHub action, like a fork, a discussion, a label. It's really almost everything. You can like basically, it's cool because when you get into it, you could say, okay, I can kick off any code in response to anything, and it's fun. It actually can get fun really fast. So that's what the on section is sort of, okay, let me list all the things that can trigger this workflow. So there's something called workflow list. Yeah.
You need to know the words events and triggers.
Yes.
Once you know that, you can Google for it and you're all set.
Exactly. Yeah, that is important. So I think a lot, less like anything else, once you have the terminology and you kind of know where to look, then it really unblocks you. So this section on is the event triggers. Okay. Then this next section is called jobs. So jobs run is like just code that will run. Right now, this is just one job. A lot of actions workflows only have one job. If you have multiple jobs, they'll all run in parallel. And they kind of run like separately, but in parallel. But most of the time, you're only doing one. I would just focus on just doing one, and you can get to parallel later.
So what is this doing? Like it has some on push to a branch.
Yeah, these are modifiers. So like this is not some like syntax that is automatically going to make sense. So you're like, okay, I want to trigger something on a push. So what you do is you come here to this documentation, you go to push, and then you might think in your mind, how do I like restrict that? I don't want to just any push. I want a push to a specific branch or something. And then you keep reading and it will actually give you, you're like, oh, okay, this is how it can filter by branches. This is how it can filter by file. This is how I can filter by tags. This is how I can filter by branches and, whatever. And you just literally copy and paste this and you just put it in your thing. All right. And that's kind of what they did is they did the same thing here. This list is the equivalent. This like square bracket is equivalent to this dash thing because it's like a YAML syntax. So it's valid YAML syntax, but that's okay. I mean, it doesn't matter. You can use whatever YAML syntax you want as long as it's valid. And then let's ignore this $sign. So this stuff is templating, and we can skip that right now. So you have to have the keyword jobs. That's just boilerplate. And this is any name that you want it to be. You're just naming the job. You can call this Radic. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be built.
It's a good name.
Yeah. And this runs on just specifies your operating system. So runs on. Well, I guess the search is not great in the docs, like in the embedded search. Yeah, well, here we go. This is good. So you can do runs on, and you can get all, you can choose your operating system.
Mm-hmm.
By default is, or I don't know what the default is, but a lot of people use Ubuntu latest. That's what I use. Like a lot of data science stuff, you want to use like some Linux thing. So I use Ubuntu. And so that's what they're using, Ubuntu. You can just forget the strategy matrix. Just forget that. Like you don't need that right now. This is a little bit more complex of a workflow, but you can just say runs on Ubuntu latest, and you can forget the strategy part.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we're getting a brand new Ubuntu installation.
That's right.
That we can do stuff on.
Yes, you can just say print hello world on it if you want to, and it will work.
Okay.
So now, so let me just, okay, so another thing so then you get into the steps. So these are like, what are the actual pieces of code that you want to run? And these are the steps. And these steps are basically a list of things. Now, this is probably really confusing. Like, what the hell is this? Uses :actions / checkout version 3. Like, that doesn't mean anything to most people. And okay, so imagine that there's a lot of these GitHub Actions out, these like workflows, and you would imagine there's a lot of like things that people do, and then they don't want to repeat themselves. Okay, like you want to clone a repository, and you don't want, it would be silly if like all sorry, I lost audio. It would be silly if across all of GitHub, everyone is doing git clone and like trying to optimize their git clone and do all this stuff. So this is a third-party workflow. This is like basically importing a workflow and saying, there is a GitHub repository called Actions Checkout. Like, so what I mean by that, if I go to, okay, let me make this big so you can see. Well, you can't make the address bar big, but if I go to github.com, okay, and I do Actions Checkout like that, that is a repo. So that is referencing a GitHub repository called Actions Checkout. And this GitHub repository is packaging some workflow that is going to run for me. In this case, this thing is just cloning a repo. I know it's silly. You're like, oh, what is all this like whole repo just for cloning a repo? It's because they've optimized it and made it to where like you don't have to authorize the thing, and it like you can do a shallow clone, all this stuff, and whatever. So
all that stuff where it's asking you to confirm the key, when you're cloning for the first time from a new machine.
You don't have to do all that stuff.
But it works only in GitHub Actions. When I'm doing this on a brand new VM that I spin up somewhere in a data center, I still need to do the handshake or whatever that I do manually from Bash.
Well, I mean, this YAML file doesn't make sense outside GitHub Actions. Like,
yes, but the repository actions checkout on GitHub.
This doesn't really make any sense. Yeah.
Okay, so it's specifically for GitHub Actions. Got it.
Yeah, specifically for GitHub Actions. And the cool thing is you can make your own actions. You can say, Radic tomorrow. I mean, we're not going to get into this right now because it's more advanced, but you can make an action that does something something that you think is cool. So anyways, like there's a lot of options. It shows you how to use it. Like you can say, this is uses, it says like you use it like this, just put the uses thing. And there's all these options. You can just, most people just go with the defaults because whatever defaults are good. So that's what that is doing. Is like, if you, there's like, okay, what is this thing doing? It is checks out your repository under the GitHub workspace directory, which is the directory that you're in. And then that's it. And this goes into a lot of more detail, but that's essentially what it's doing is checking out this directory. This data loader directory is being checked out. And then there's another GitHub action. So now that you understand this, now you understand this line of code too, because it's the same thing. What does this do? Okay, let's check it out. So action, set up Python. What is that? So this version thing is just referencing, how you can have tags in repositories.
Yep.
So this, this like release tags, that's just referencing the release tag. So you can pin it if you want, depending on how much that matters to you. But same thing with set up Python. This just sets up a specific version of Python. So you don't have to like install Python. Installing Python is kind of tedious. You have to like do all this stuff. You don't want to deal with that. So like, this is there for you to install, to set up with Python. And we'll go back to this templating after we're done. And so, okay, this is installing Ubuntu packages. And so this run command just allows you to run any shell command. And I think you know what this means. This is just saying you want to update your registries, your, that for the Linux package manager. This is running yet another shell command. This is something that you would do on your laptop. And then now this again is running another shell command here. And this is just running, this looks like it's just doing some kind of test with like talks, maybe. I actually don't know. With talks.
Yeah, talks is a thing that will set up an environment for you. So it's, I guess, setting up the environment and running the test in that virtual environment. So you can specify what you want installed there.
Yeah, no, totally. And so like this stuff you don't really need to know. I mean, who cares what this is? But this is doing some other thing. This is like putting some information about some. Okay, so the cool thing about GitHub Actions is it gives you a lot of these like special variables. So this is called the GitHub context. So GitHub context actions. That's the term that you need to unlock this information. And there's this GitHub context. And this GitHub context is like this special variable that contains a lot of information about what triggered this event. Like, this GitHub.action gives you the name of the action, or this ref gives you like the reference to like the branch name or the SHA. This gives you the, like a repository name. This will give you, you can read it, but like there's a lot of special variables. And so you can end up using that for various things. I mean, it's like really handy. And so that's what this templating is just doing, is saying, hey, I just want you to store the event number, and this person for whatever reason wanted to keep the pull request number and the, if this pull request was merged yet or some other stuff in these text files, and then wanted to save those text files somewhere. Like GitHub has this like storage that you can use that we don't need to talk about today. Like that's like a feature. I don't know if people really want to learn about that right now, but you get the idea. You can run shell commands of whatever you want, and then you can use third-party GitHub Actions, and you can like Google like, hey, is there an action that someone made that already does that thing, and like use that. So like, for example, you might be like, one thing you might want to do is set up Conda. Okay, that's a pain in the butt. I mean, it depends how lazy you are. I'm pretty lazy, so you're like, set up Conda GitHub Actions, for example. And I did this the other day, and you can see, okay, that's great. These people, this Conda incubator org has set up a GitHub action for me that will, like I can see that it makes it a bit easier for me. I can just pass in like a YAML file, like somewhere in here. Yeah, like an environment YAML file, and I'll set it up. Because I don't want to do all that. I don't want to download it and like whatever. So it can be fun. It can start to really, do stuff. So like, yeah, you already know how to read this YAML. I bet you now this YAML file is no longer intimidating. And now see, like,
Yes.
what you can do is, so up here, now this templating here, this is being fed from, so this strategy is basically template variables. So strategy matrix, that's just boilerplate. Like that's how you start to list template variables. You have one template variable called matrix.python version and matrix.os. What happens is that gets populated here, that gets populated here, here. It just becomes part of the string. You see, so like now, Python version equals 3.9. Now this is silly because they only have one item here. And so this actually was not necessary to do it like this. You could just hard code 3.9. But I mean, I guess like they just didn't want to repeat themselves, I guess. Like if you change 3.9 here, and then it'll make it'll change the name and in the thing, whatever. The thing that's kind of cool about this is like if you have a list here, like 3.8, 3.9, 3.10, whatever, it'll run them all in parallel. The strategy matrix thing. But whatever, that's more advanced. So that's kind of like how you do it. I am making this course. I like do some consulting for weights and biases, as you know. And there is a course, like, let me just show you some more GitHub actions that maybe are interesting. I'll start with like a very simple one. So like a very simple one would be this one. So this is like, okay, the name, the triggers on a pull request. It runs on Ubuntu, checks out the repo, and it pip installs the requirements, and it just runs some script. So this is understandable.
Yes.
There's also, this is another example where I'm using the Mamba action, for example. I mean, this is a little bit more, just ignore that. This is kind of even advanced for me. I mean, I had to figure out something specific. This is just like something that gets prepended to each shell command that I run. This is something you need to do for if you're using Conda in GitHub Actions. But basically, that's how it works. And so, let me see if there's anything else that's interesting.
Yeah.
This could be interesting.
Huh?
Like, okay, so this is kind of similar. I'm giving GitHub Actions elevated permissions to make a comment on a PR. I'm saying you can read and write onto a PR. And I need to give I gave it to issues as well, but don't want to get into that. And I'm using the GhAPI to make a comment here. So I made the shell Python, and and this is like the Python code. It's just making a comment on the PR that says, "Hey, I'm making a comment with GhAPI and actions," and it will do that when the PR gets opened, or something.
So GhAPI API, that's a library from FastAI, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and I have like this course that I will be doing has some notebooks. I have this like client notebook, give you like some idea of like cool things you can do. So like you can list pull requests, you can make a comment on a pull request, you can label a pull request, you can look at events, you can like look at these like payload events. So like, okay, one important concept in GitHub Actions. Let's see, where did I go with this? To go back to find. So like, let me actually just open another screen. I need to go back and forth. So if you notice down here, I'm getting this GitHub.event number. You might look at this and say like, how in the hell did I know that? Because you won't, if you go to if you Google GitHub context, whatever, and you try to look at the GitHub context, you'll see in here GitHub event, but then what is beneath that, you don't know. And what's beneath that is something called a payload. So the GitHub event is a full event payload, and that's really important with GitHub Actions. There's basically this big JSON blob that tells you even more, like everything, all the data associated with the event that triggered that action. And so the way it looks is like this. It's like this big JSON. You see like this, it looks like this. I mean, it's color coded weird in GitHub, but this, just trust me. It's basically a big JSON thing. And so the idea is, like I'm referencing the number. There's like a number field in that payload, and I'm just grabbing it. It's like this, it's a JSON syntax. And so GitHub GhAPI is really cool because it has a lot of sample payloads. You can like muck around and say, oh, like what is in this pay? Like, this, I'm saying, I'm getting the sample issue comment event created payload. And then, and just like accessing that in the notebook, and I'm prototyping this code for the GitHub action that does whatever.
Got it.
And so, yeah, it's cool. So like basically you can make your own tools that do your own things. And it's kind of fun in that sense.
So you can use GitHub Actions to spin up a VM on some trigger, on some GitHub action, and then you can run a bunch of steps to do various things like, install some stuff on the VM and then maybe check something. But let's say that it's run on every commit or on every push to a branch. What happens if it fails?
Yeah. So
one of the steps, or how does that get into that CI/CD workflow on GitHub?
Yeah.
Do you need to connect it or?
Yeah. So okay. So if you want running unit tests or something, you want those tests to run pretty fast, like under a minute maybe, and it's okay to run that on every commit. And it'll show up. There's a pretty large free allowance for GitHub Actions for like open source projects and I think public projects and things like that, and maybe even private projects. There's a pretty like generous free tier. And so yeah, those are designed to fail, and they'll just show you like this commit failed and this commit passed. Like you'll get like instead of a green check mark, you'll get a red thing. It'll be like red, and then green. So you can know, okay, like I finally got passed in this. Now you might not want to run things on every commit. What if you have some like interesting thing maybe that takes a long time or doesn't really make sense to run on every commit? One of my favorite things is this ChatOps pattern where I can like make my own chat bot quote. This, it's not anything like ChatGPT, but that's not what I mean. It's like I can make my own commands. I like to do this in GitHub. It's like, so like this is like a command /1db, and I'm providing a run number, and I'm saying, hey, this PR is associated with this run number, and then GitHub Actions like goes, it like creates this thing, and it like builds this report for me. It says, okay, like whatever, I'm comparing these runs, and this is a comparison of this. The baseline run is something, whatever. And this is just illustrative, but basically, like you can think of anything, and you can do this ChatOps pattern and say like, oh, okay. And then I say, okay, I want to promote this run to like do something, then model registry, and then it will deploy that model in the registry or do something. Like this is illustrative, but this is like a ChatOps. It's called a ChatOps pattern.
It's awesome to know the name because I saw this in Merlin repositories as well, where we can rerun tests just by entering a comment that says rerun tests, and it will retrigger the pipeline without having to push.
Oh, that's
so
awesome.
Now I know.
Can you show me? Like, is it a public one that does that?
Yeah. It's just we can just look up one of my PRs that got merged recently, and I'm not sure if you can look it up yourself or I can look it up without issue here on my end. So I'm going to GitHub and pull requests and then closed. And I remember there was a big PR that I submitted not too long ago. Yeah, it was the review getting started example. So I definitely used the ChatOps functionality there. Okay, let me
why don't you share your screen? Can you show that? Let me stop
or I
sharing my
can
screen.
maybe. Okay, sure thing. So I will share my screen here. Sharing my screen. All right. So this is the PR, and I can just am I searching for this? Rerun. Okay.
So that's awesome. Okay, you get a documentation preview. Okay, cool. You rerun test.
Yeah. So of course you don't want flaky tests, right? So you're like, but sometimes I think it might address this as well. Like sometimes something changes upstream, and then you want to retrigger the test because let's say we identified some issue somewhere and my colleagues fix it, and then I want to see if my PR will pass now. So I just do the rerun test, and it retriggers the entire pipeline, and it also rerun tests. And I'm not sure how this is set up, but some tests that are run on the GPU are run on a machine that lives somewhere off GitHub. It's not a GitHub VM. It's those tests. Can we see those tests somewhere here? I'm not sure if it's showing the tests now that it got merged.
It's running on your own infrastructure.
On our own infrastructure, yes. One of the tests is it's a longer test that runs in environments that require a GPU. So if we have a huge CTR or want to test something on PyTorch or TensorFlow running on the GPU, so these larger tests, integration tests, we execute them on our own infrastructure.
That's cool. So like, yeah, you're doing CI/CD like with machine learning in service of like machine learning tooling and other things. And
Yeah,
it looks like it's like, very integral in your workflow.
It is, but I'm on the consumer side of things. I didn't set this up. I don't even look at the YAML file, or maybe, I looked once or twice, but it's just confusing. It was confusing to me. And I never had the need to dive deeper into it. But it's definitely very useful to even know the terms, like that these are triggers, actions, the ChatOps paradigm, as a starting point to explore this further. That's already very useful. And now that I have the overview that you've given us of what is happening in that file, and also the idea that you don't have to write it out from scratch yourself, because that's really intimidating. If I
you don't
look
have
at
to. You shouldn't actually.
Wonderful. So
the documentation preview is really cool. Like if you have your own blog or own static site, that's like a good way to start. Like I know Radic, you have your own site. And let's say, for example, I don't know, maybe you like pull requests or whatever on, for your own stuff. Or you have a group page with other people, like let's say some other static site, and you wanted in the pull request to do a preview of that page. You could do like a ChatOps command or something else. Unless, like with Netlify or your favorite previewing thing. And you could like just be automated like in there.
So it could generate the static side or the docs and deploy somewhere where I can see them, right?
Yeah, it can do that. And you can also do your final deploy automatically. Like when you merge to master, okay, it'll just do it for you. It'll build it, push it, whatever. What do you want?
Because so far I have been relying on Netlify or whatever else I would use to do this thing on their end, where they see that, hey, there's a new version, so we'll pull this and we'll deploy it for you.
That's totally fine.
But you're saying that, now that, for instance, I have my blog hosted on Ghost, that's on my VM that runs somewhere in a data center. So technically, I could set up a workflow where it would get auto-deployed a new version.
Yeah, you can have it like, rsync your, like the way Jeremy Howard does it with some sites, because we experimented, is he has some actions that rsync the files to his VM. like for hosting the docs. Because not all the docs are GitHub pages. Like there's still some that, because we just like we're experimenting. So yeah, you can do anything. You can like, yeah, you can do stuff. It's like automation for your life. And then so like there's this guy Simon Willison. You might know him.
Yeah, of course, I know him.
And he does a lot of interesting stuff. Like he actually uses, because you can have a cron. One of the triggers get actions is cron, and so he, rightfully so, abuses that. He says like, look, this
Wait
is
a
my free
second.
VM in the cloud. I'm just gonna run all kinds of stuff every day that I want to run every day, and just like just that's fine.
Wait a second. Really? You can just, like so there's a cron, like you can literally say run every 5 hours or whatever, like you would do on your uh, you know on your local VM
Yeah.
or on your
So
local machine.
absolutely.
Like front
Um
up and wow.
cron so GitHub Actions cron. So you'll see cron, or there was cron. Yeah. So it'll be cron is list like this on schedule. You just put cron, and then there's I don't like I always struggle with what the hell this means, and I use that cron
Yeah,
tab guru thing, cron tab dot guru, whatever. I don't
cool.
yeah, and
This
then
is
I just
super
figure it out.
useful. Love it, love it.
The only
Okay.
catch is like they know that people abuse it, so you have to do something in your repository. Um you have to like keep it active. Like you have to make an issue comment something like every so and so days. Well, what's funny is in Fast AI, I found a way to automate that thing. So like I'm using GitHub Actions and putting my own personal token in there and then having it make like comments. Like I'm
So
having it make comments on repos and then like close the repo.
love it,
Um
love it, love it,
yeah.
love it.
I
Oh,
maybe I can find it.
that's
No. It's called Keep Alive, but anyways, yeah. It's kind of funny that way. Um
so this opens up a world of possibilities.
Yeah, and so
Essentially.
like I just want to mention one thing is like so I was so fascinated by this topic that I decided like to push it to the extreme, to push the
Mhm.
experiment to the extreme. And I said, okay, what if like you build entire software with GitHub Actions? Like, what if you could just like put some files in a repository and have GitHub Actions like do everything? Like just so like one idea was like, oh, can you just like save a notebook, a Jupyter notebook into a folder in GitHub and have it just magically become a web page?
Yeah.
Like, and that's what Fast Pages was. So Fast Pages was like GitHub Actions on steroids. Basically, like I mean, it's now deprecated because you should use Corto, but the
Hmm.
idea was like, okay, you just basically, put something in this notebooks folder, and then it just creates a page. GitHub Actions automatically will do whatever it does. Um, And then there was like interesting workflows for like upgrading Fast Pages. I did that through issues. Like you open an issue on your own repository and it knows to like go pull the upgrade or whatever. It was like kind of fun. Like
Wow. I was right in the intro. You're like, uh, deeply embedded into the MLOps way of thinking. You're like creating these little MLOps kingdoms, where things happen. This wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. I love this way of automating things. And I'm still super impressed by the idea of that cron thing, that you can trigger things based on time. Because to do any such thing on your own, you have to set up a VM somewhere, like pay $7 for that or whatever. But just the process of setting it up on AWS or GCP is painful. Then you have to set up the cron there. You have to maintain whatever is happening there. And here you just, all of this is abstracted away. All you have is a YAML file in a repository and then some definition of the steps to take. That's
yeah. So
that's
this is
just
what
insane.
Simon Willison does, this really cool thing where he tracks changes to various websites, repositories, all kinds of stuff by using cron. And he just goes out, he snapshots it, brings it down into his repo, and he like collects the Git diffs. And he does like really interesting stuff for like, you know, yeah, like he like diffs websites. He can like track websites. Like okay, change logs to understand the fires in the North Bay. Scraping hurricane data. He does this with cron. See this right here. He is doing cron, and then he's going out. He's scraping this fire information, and he's saving it to his repository. Really fun.
So in theory, one could even do something crazy like trigger some workflow every 6 hours, have it look up some information. Can you do API calls
Absolutely.
so you could make an API to an endpoint that would summarize the information for you, or some other OpenAI
Absolutely.
endpoint, write it
Absolutely.
somewhere, it could get deployed.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. So
Wow.
there's this thing called COVID-19 dashboards. Let me see if I can find it. Okay, so I don't know if the site is still even there. Wow, it's still up because it's not being maintained. But basically, these are a list of dashboards that are automatically refreshed with GitHub Actions. So what like how it works is, like you have a notebook. Let's say I don't know. I'm trying to remember which one is like a simple one. Hopefully, this is a simple one. Maybe it's not. But it's like, hey, it goes out, it gets some data from some site, and then it just updates this notebook, and it kind of let me show you the
Yeah.
GitHub action because it might be a little bit less. So like
But that's a
this
notebook that's getting updated. So we're
yeah,
triggering the run of a notebook. So we can make the
absolutely,
action really simple. Like we don't have to, fumble around with those steps. You don't have to do bash scripting or, some files to
yeah,
be executed. We can just tell, hey, run this notebook for me. And then
yeah.
the notebook does the magic. So I
Yeah,
can
and you can
use
even make it
the,
into a web page. You can even make the notebook into a web page that automatically just appears. Like, see, like this is a cron. See this?
yeah.
And then
Yeah.
down here, I am somewhere down here. Let's see if I can find it. Um, Hold on. Um, okay, I have to find another one. Let's see, update page maybe. I don't know where I do it. I do it somewhere. I think I eventually. Yeah, see, like I run paper mill, paper mill, and say, okay, like run, certain notebooks. Um, Actually, this is not the right file, but it's the idea is somewhere I'm using paper mill. I haven't looked at this project in a long time, so I don't quite remember. I think it's
So
via, yeah, okay, it's this run notebook script. See this run notebooks
a
sh.
notebook. Uh-huh.
So like, yeah, that run notebooks.sh is just, um, it's doing that. It's just using paper mill, and it's just taking the file and running it. That's all. I made it more complicated into this bash script. It makes it a little bit harder to read, but you get the idea.
So what is Papermill? It's something that runs the notebooks, right?
Yeah, so there's this project out of Netflix called Papermill Notebooks, and it'll allow you to run notebooks programmatically, which is cool.
But it runs on GitHub VM, the GitHub VM that's running the GitHub action.
Yeah, it can run anywhere. It can run on your laptop if you want. But
Yeah,
yeah, this
mhm.
can it can run anywhere. It can run in the GitHub Actions. Yeah.
So it's sort of like execNB in many
Yeah, it's
ways.
exactly so like okay, Papermill is like a full Python runner, like can run any kernel. Can run a Scala kernel, can run a whatever .NET kernel. If you want, there's this project called exec uh execNB
Yeah,
from
it's
Fast
one of
AI.
my favorite projects as well because It's just so simple, and it gives you so much power.
Oh yeah, yeah. And it's like fast. It's like 100 times faster than paper mill. But it's also slimmed down to just only Python. It's like only doing Python. You can do Python, you can do shell commands, and it's like IPython slimmed down. It's very specific. Um, it's like using it in NVDev, and it runs fast. And it has actually now, how Jeremy does. He has like other cool features, and it's actually a really cool project. But yeah, there's a lot of ways to programmatically execute notebooks. It's like pretty fun. You can actually have like dashboards that update every day with just notebooks. You just turn your notebooks into dashboards like for free.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So it seems that it's really hard to get to what we discussed from just the information in the documentation of GitHub Actions, or just overhearing people mention GitHub Actions every now and then.
Mm-hmm.
Now it makes much more sense, and it doesn't seem to be a tool only for enterprises. It's a tool for hackers as well, for a person that has something that they want to spend less time on so that they can automate it. It requires a bit of coding, so it's not like Zapier, for example, which is just point and click, but it's the same idea. And because it can execute any code, it's actually more powerful, right?
That's
So
right.
it's
Yeah.
that's really cool. So just maybe one question, if I may, please, to make all this more complete for me, where I will feel that I can come up with a project, or I have something that I want to automate, and I will be able to jump in and pull it off. What about secrets? All these API calls, they require some secrets.
Yeah. So let me show you. So let me show you a hello world secret situation. Um this is a secret. Okay.
Mhm.
I don't know why the syntax highlighting is not making this green or whatever, but I don't know, whatever. So like, um, this myvar environment variable is a secret. Is getting that from the secrets thing. The way you specify secrets is like in settings. So I'm in the repository. There's a settings tab,
Uh-huh.
and then I go to secrets, and then I go to actions. In here, I have repository secrets, and then you can set a secret. So like that one was called my secret, and so the way I referenced it is like this.
Beautiful.
And
Beautiful.
there's a lot of
So,
security baked in. So if you try to print this, okay, GitHub Actions will screen it. It'll just make it into asterisks. It'll say, oh, you're trying to it like detects the fact that there's a string match on your secret in standard out or being to the logs, so it won't print it. It'll just mask it. Things like that. There's a lot of like things in place to like try to harden this situation. And there's different
yeah,
ways to put secrets, but that's the common way.
that's fabulous. That's easy. I just go to the settings tab and I'm on my way. And I trust GitHub engineering way more than I trust myself in terms of handling, sensitive information. That's also why I use a password manager and things like this, because I know that there are certain solutions that just can't be trusted. So I'm comfortable in trusting my OpenAI API key or whatever that, will not have much repercussions, even if it is disclosed, but even with more sensitive things. That seems like a great solution. Hamel, this has been amazing, my friend. Thank you so much.
Yeah, hope
Um,
it was like maybe helpful to learn a little bit about some of this stuff.
eye-opening. Another great discussion. So thank you so very much for that. And I link to you on Twitter. I link to your YouTube channel, to your blog. So hopefully people can find you. And also, whenever you release the course or anything of that sort, let us know. I'm definitely interested.
Cool. Yeah, that's great.
Though I feel that already this, makes me dangerous. The knowledge from this recording, I can't believe how much ground we covered. You read documentation and it's just you don't get the idea of what you can do with this technology. But yeah, that was awesome. So
no, it's not.
thank
It's
you.
nice someone explains to you from your perspective why you should care, certain terminology. It kind of makes it like, okay, now you can read the docs and kind of,
Yes,
it removes all the fear, I think.
and you know what to Google for. That's
Yeah.
also so important, just knowing the names. Thank you so much, Hamel, and thank you, dear listener, for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it. See you soon.
All right. Thank you.